Welcome. Yeah. Welcome, friends. Good afternoon. Yeah, good. My name is Jennifer Oz Freeman. I'm the Associate Professor of Theology and the Arts at United, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Nexus, which is the culminating event of the Arts Practicum course. Over the term, students develop projects around key theological and philosophical spiritual issues and questions in a medium of their choosing. The works you're going to hear about this afternoon reflect not just the studies from this term, but also the influence of countless conversations and courses, experiences over the past several years, and we could say even our students' lives. The title Nexus was selected by the students as a collective, and if you're a Star Trek fan, I probably don't have to tell you that Nexus is a realm or dimension, and here I'm already out of my depths in terms of Star Trek, so you could tell me perhaps. But it's this kind of alternate dimension that weaves through space like a ribbon, and it's a kind of ribbon of energy where normal space-time rules don't apply. People can like navigate by their mind, and it's kind of used in that 1994 movie Generations, Star Trek Generations. It's used as a kind of time travel device. So of course you think theology and the arts, of obviously connection. But actually the students use this concept as a really, I think, generative jumping off point for finding resonances between their different bodies of work that they were creating in the class. So you'll see on display and then in our conversation here, some of those visual and thematic kind of elements, like the way that a spiral turns back on itself as it moves forward, or the way that our experience of like history, memory, construction, like imaginings or hopes for the future, the embodied experience of that, dreams and things like that form and construct our identities. Nexus was also used or described by students as a focal point. So the intersections of different elements as a way of drawing attention particularly perhaps for something that needs repair or addressing in some kind of way. So a focal point, bringing people together. Over the course of our term, I really enjoyed and benefited from our conversations. We talked about what an artistic voice is, what the responsibility of the artist is in society. What do we do with kind of fallow points in our artistic practices, and how can we kind of think about those rather than have a like shame-based idea of like, I haven't been making art, you know, to understand that like the good humus of dirt, that things are fermenting and kind of still doing work, even in those times where it seems like we're maybe not being productive. Basically, we're throwing off the shackles of capitalism, you know, no small project. But it was really actually, I got a lot out of those conversations and felt particularly nourished by them. So I'm always amazed by this class and by the community that students create, even as they're located all over the country. And I felt in particular this term, there were some certain even personal struggles I experienced this term, and I want to publicly express my thanks to the students in the class for being so caring and generous and accommodating to and really loving in those times. So it's a testament to the work that you're doing. A couple of practical things. On behalf of the Praxis cohort, I'd want to thank the guest artists who visited our class and spoke about their own work: Allison Jones, Jacques Miller, right here, and Spencer Reese. And I also have to say thanks to Cheryl Schweigert, who is esteemed alum of United and installation expert extraordinaire, et cetera, et cetera. Our thanks go to Cheryl all the time. And also to T. Michael Rock, who's helping with tech and supporting this event. Cindy Beth Johnson, an important advocate for theology and the arts. Yes. And to all who have supported the planning of the event. In terms of logistics, I'm going to introduce each of the artists individually before they speak, and then we'll take a brief intermission about halfway through. There was a little card at the back there that has the order of speakers, and we're going to save all of our questions for the end. I think, as you'll see very quickly, that there will be a lot of ways that the works speak kind of back and forth to each other. So, and there are plenty of refreshments that you can help yourself to throughout. So we'll start with Emily. Emily McKown is a multimedia artist and lifelong Unitarian Universalist working in campus ministry in Urbana, sorry. I'm from Wisconsin. I never say Urbana, Illinois. She has a passion for songwriting and singing in many contexts. Emily is a congregational song leader, an activist, a band leader, and folk, country, and pop ensembles. She's currently working as operations director for a radically inclusive community choir and nonprofit called CU Sings People's Chorus. And I'll just say it's been a joy to get to know Emily over this past little while and see her using her interdisciplinary artistic talents to educate, I'll say, not evangelize necessarily in like a good way, you'll see, but to educate and to inspire your various communities. So I just want, if there's one thing maybe you take away from the class, is like interdisciplinary cheerleader. Don't feel bad about doing a whole bunch of different things. So be it. Okay.
Well, yeah. Can you hear me okay? It's nice to have that affirmation. Thanks for that introduction. Let me, before I really get started, I realized I wanted to do a double check of the tune of my guitar. It sounds pretty in tune. What do you think? Musicians in the audience? Okay, thank you. Great. Well, I made the video that you're going to see while I was listening to executive orders on Democracy Now! And you know, trying to avoid my work email notifications alongside group cat chat memes. And so this project I call home video is an amalgamation of my sensory experience as a Zoom student in the age of TikTok and AI. Many social scientists are talking about what they call the economy of attention. And this term was coined by Herbert A. Simon. And, he makes the argument that in an information-rich world, what's really scarce and in demand is that of our attention. I set out to use the same means of production, audio and video, which certainly drive the attention economy and also mediates my experience as a Zoom student. And I believe the attention economy, at least as it is today, it has the capacity to just destroy us, to make us afraid of each other and technology, to rob us of our sense of connection, self-worth, of purpose. I hoped that my little project would break through and let a little light in. And so while the attention economy inspires the kind of style and form of this project, theological conversations of vocation inspire the intentionally mixed media we'll see. And as Dr. AF lifted up, Nexus is the name of our showcase today. And for me, the nexus that I am engaging with is the kind of the literal definition of the word, a connection of one or more things. And so the biggest gift seminary has given to me is a religious sense of vocation, which in itself is its own kind of nexus. I believe vocation to be an intersection of a gift from God alongside the choices we make day to day. In the populist lineage of Martin Luther himself, we affirm that even in the day-to-day tasks, in the ordinary and mundane enterprise that it is to be human, we can choose to live into these tasks in a hearty embrace of our sacred calling. It was Dr. Sabia Tanis on faculty here who helped to enliven this discussion for me when he lifted up gender identity as a kind of vocation. With his formulation, I can see identity as something that is both essential and constructed. Our identities are roused by God and the natural world around us, but that is only half the bargain. The other half is our creative response. The work I present is a representation of this creative dance with the divine. We have the organic and the digital and the looped synthesizers you'll hear along with my voice and my acoustic guitar. We have the live performance and pre-recorded loops expanding and collapsing time. You'll see many images here in a minute that also weave the nexus of the tactile and technological. This nexus, it can often feel precarious. It feels precarious to be human in a technological age. So many of us wake up with the chaos of the news cycle. We have a hard time regulating our heartbeat or our breath, I believe, because we're just so far away from each other. And we're left alone with our blue screens, tempted by algorithms, which thrive on vitriol and vanity. We don't know exactly what these technological advances will bring, We don't know the exact way the climate crisis will impact our footpath. We don't know if we'll live to see democracy win out in our lifetime against authoritarianism. We seminarians in 2025 don't even know if there will be a church to greet us when we graduate. There's so much we don't know. It's so easy to worry. But Dr. Packman reminds us about the consolation there is in a theological education, and I feel that too. I feel that a theological education equips us with a bifocal lens in which to see the world, to engage with the pulsing beat of the everyday, looking deeply at the present, like looking deeply, not looking away, but looking through, looking beyond, staying curious about what was and what could be. I believe this bifocal lens to be a superpower, which grants us the ability to cast our attention where we choose. We will not be relegated to our anxious corners. I know the art you'll see presented today by my colleagues is a testament to this superpower. My song DJ and this home video you'll see is about creating a nostalgia for the present and getting comfortable with the precarity of unknowing the future. We know the stakes are high. So all the more reason to study our heartbeats together in the present for whatever the future holds. This project is an offering of hope for you, for a new orientation to our human technologies. Help us remember we have a body and the planet is our home. All right, you want to roll it? Thank you. Oh, it's delayed. There's always a song when I get out of bed and you hear it. DJ, where you come from? DJ, where you taking me to? I need something to get me through. Kick off from classics, look around, pull out your microscope, buried in the ground. Wrap up your antenna in a blanket of sound. Pull the lights down low to illuminate all that you have. Must be DJ in my life, 'cause there's always a song when I get out of bed and pee.
DJ, where you come from? DJ, where you take me to? I need something to get me through.
Oh, the set change. Okay. Thanks for, we collectively as a class also agreed that Emily's piece would be a great way to start and like set the vibe. That feels like perfect. So thank you so much for doing that. Our next speaker is Tierany Lyons. Tierany is a visual artist, art educator, and grad student in the MA in Theology and the Arts program at United. She holds a BA in visual art education from Mount Vernon Nazarene University, and she's currently teaching secondary level art, where she designs interdisciplinary, community-centered art experiences. And I'll say she's shared a little bit of those art experiences with us in class, and it was fabulous. Her creative and academic work explores embodiment, sacred narrative, and transformation through visual media. With exhibitions across Ohio and beyond, Tierany approaches art as a form of theological inquiry, inviting dialogue between faith, form, and lived experience. And I have to say that, well, I hope you don't mind me saying it this way, Tierany, but Tierany has a kind of like unassuming sweetness that's like a great disguise for her fierceness somehow. I think like actually like a fiercely creative, powerful person. So you've been warned, I guess, you all. So Tierany, I'll hand it to you, and I'll just change the slides when you tell me to.
Okay, yes. Thank you, Dr. Freeman. That was such a nice compliment. I have a few of my pieces. I think that I have 3 slides worth of them, so we'll just kind of switch them throughout for those of us who are on Zoom. So good afternoon. I'm so grateful to share this small body of work with you all today. My aim through both the active creation and the finished pieces is not to seek resonance with any particular audience, but rather to clarify my own existence through the practice of creating, contemplating, and dwelling within an intentional space of holy embodiment. I situate myself within my lived experience as a mother, daughter, and woman. I'm drawing also from my own understanding of the divine. These paintings and drawings, as well as the creative process itself, serve both as a form of questioning and as a construction of knowledge, an inquiry outside of traditional modes of learning. In this, I'm speaking to the historical assumption that only empirical knowledge, that which is quantifiable or steeped in tradition, holds value. A painting, then, becomes a way of holding space for my embodied experience, a process that engages the imagination and personal understanding, inviting new images and patterns of meaning to emerge through visual language. The work this semester arises from questions surrounding power, propriety, and the importance of centering the body within spirituality. I reflect on the role of the Holy Spirit and the infleshing of Christ, building on Elaine Scarry's insight into that social advantage becomes customary and sanctioned by precedents. I ask, how does the word proper function as an instrument for establishing a normative experience? In my own life, propriety has often meant the covering or shaming of the body, a mechanism of control, of setting boundaries around which is pure and holy. Dr. Freeman, you can switch to the next slide. Formally, this series consists of 10 small-scale watercolor and graphite pieces. including a variety of recurring imagery that has held my attention throughout the term. Abstracted female anatomy appears as porous forms, openings that receive and give energy fluidly. Nipples drip, limbs stretch, and navels hold space for the flow of spirit. Spirals and circles are also frequent, offering a meditation on time, not as linear but ever moving. They evoke return, memory, and the self's encounter within itself, expanding and contracting, an inhale and an exhale, speaking to both interior and outward relationships. In this series, I incorporate anatomy as part of a visual conversation rooted in my own personal narrative. This work explores my thoughts on the intersection of body and nurture, specifically the intimacy of milk as substance and its symbolic closeness to blood. Through this lens, I consider themes of creation, nourishment, and maternal rear. The mystic Julia of Norwich has deeply influenced my thinking, particularly her words, "Our Lady is our mother in whom we are all enclosed, and we are born from her in Christ. God, all wisdom, is our mother by nature. The great power of the Trinity is our Father, and the deep wisdom of the Trinity our mother." These spaces pictorially do not attempt to assign definitive meaning, but instead interweave my understanding and curiosity around the presence, movement, and infleshing of Christ in relation to the body. Visually, these thoughts emerge through ambiguous forms, swirling portals, fragile hands. While recognizable, these elements are not rendered hyper-realistically. My intention is to offer a vision in the periphery, what is known and yet unknown, seen and yet unseen. My work is also informed by the concept of ontological symbols, visual realities that gesture towards the ineffable divine. These symbols shimmer between personal narrative and cultural expectation. In the same way that truth can be spoken about the divine and beauty can be encountered through speech, I offer paintings and drawings as the visual articulation of beauty and goodness. Classical definitions of beauty speak to an intrinsic quality, an arrangement of proportion, unity, variety, and harmony that please the mind. While these criteria are objective, beauty is perceived subjectively. In my work, painting and drawing function not as a language, but as a vessel for my own encounter with beauty and goodness. It is impossible to fully understand the divine, but through paint, form, and image, I construe meaning. To know the nature of wisdom as it breathes into a shallow pool of blue. To gesture towards goodness that is inherent to the body. The leaking and consuming of milk to nourish the womb, passing from exterior to interior through small swirling portals. My hope is that these works will continue to speak to my own embodied experience. My presence, a knowing, a form of authoritative truth within my continued contemplation of the divine. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Tierany. Okay, our next speaker is Leah Eichmiller. Leah is a jewelry designer, artist, and spiritual care companion who creates intentional adornments in partnership with the divine and the Holy Spirit. Each piece is crafted with natural stones and crystals chosen for their beauty and energetic qualities. She believes that even the touch of one bead can bring calm, spark healing, inspire abundance, and remind us of our worth. Her work is rooted in reverence for the earth, for spirit, and for the power of handmade creation. Through every piece, she aims to offer a sense of grounding, connection, and quiet transformation. And my addendum is that I don't use the word, I think brave is like a cheesy word. But the word that I'm thinking about with you today is like brave. So I'll just say, I feel like I just really appreciate, I think I had the sense there are sometimes some spaces in class that were where you were doing that, where you were kind of like pushing yourself or in some discomfort at different points. And maybe that's even happening right now, but and maybe it makes it worse by me saying that out loud. I recognize that after, sorry, my bad. That's the problem with verbal processing is like you realize as you're talking, like maybe that was a thing to share with you afterwards. But I'll just say, I really admire and appreciate that. And as you know, you're here among friends. And so really looking forward. One practical thing I forgot to ask is, can we touch your rosary beads then that are on display? I can add a little sign for that because the beautiful words that you wrote to accompany them and, oops, excuse me, invite that invitation. So thank you, Leah.
Thank you, Dr. AF. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, it does feel brave to get up here because it feels like I'm naked. Okay. Life has a way of guiding us, sometimes gently, sometimes with a jolt, toward what our soul most needs. Over the past few years, I've been called to explore one concept in particular, grace. Not as a lofty or abstract idea, but as a living presence. A grace that arrives unannounced and shifts reality, that opens doors where there were only walls. A grace that whispers, yes, when everything else says, not yet. I've come to believe in this grace as the movement of the Holy Spirit within all that is. And the more I surrender to it, the more I witness what can only be called the miraculous. About 2 years ago, I felt deeply blessed to be creating sacred jewelry. Unexpectedly immersed in a world of shimmering beads and magical tools, I found myself drawn to the creation of prayer beads and wearable talismans, items that hold intention, that anchor energy, that serve as quiet companions in the journey of faith and feeling. I quickly discovered that simply touching a bead, especially in a moment of doubt or anxiety, and pairing it with a thought of gratitude had an immediate calming effect on my nervous system. This practice became both spiritual and somatic. For me, every bead I make and wear is a prayer bead, a sacred reminder of a deeper truth, that love is always present, both around us and within. While this practice has become deeply personal to me, I also recognize that it is not new, far from it. The use of spiritual beads spans continents, centuries, and countless traditions. From Catholic rosaries to Buddhist malas, from Islamic misbahas to indigenous seed beads and African waist beads, cultures across the globe have long understood what I have only recently begun to experience, that beads can be sacred tools. They are not just decorative, they are devotional. They are used to count prayers, to steady the breath, to soothe the nervous system, and to anchor the soul in moments of silence or suffering. This is not a practice that I invented. It is a tradition I've been led to and one that I feel deeply honored to join. These sacred strands have always been a way to connect with the divine, a tactile rhythm that brings spirit into form. To work with them is to participate in an ancient cross-cultural lineage of embodied prayer. It reminds me that my hands are not just creating, they are remembering. That each bead strung is a quiet act of reverence, joining a long and holy thread that stretches far beyond me across space and time. In that same spirit, I found that working with my hands, shaping, stringing, painting, creating, is one of the most powerful ways for me to come home to myself. When the world feels like too much, when I feel overwhelmed, overstimulated, or disconnected from my center, the simple act of creating something with care and intention brings me back. It grounds me. It reminds me of who I am beyond fear or noise. It's not just a craft, it's a form of prayer, a pathway back to presence and inner clarity. In a culture that often values productivity over presence, consumption over connection, I have found that slowing down to make something beautiful, especially with spirit as my collaborator, is one of the most healing choices I can make. For this project, I created a strand of prayer beads using primarily pink opal. To me, pink opal carries a soft, gentle frequency, tender, nurturing, and heart-opening. In a world that often feels harsh and hurried, I believe we need more softness, more tenderness, more grace. I paired the beads with gold-filled findings, which hold their old energetic wisdom. Gold is fluid and radiant and invites warmth, abundance, and flow. Blessing. Of all the metals, it feels the most nurturing, like the sun's embrace or the quiet strength of a mother's touch. At the heart of the strand, I painted a small portal on the metallic centerpiece. I wanted it to be subtle yet powerful, a divine feminine threshold. The process was full of trial and error, especially since this was something I'd never done before, but I was committed to staying open and letting the process guide me. I also crafted several beads from scratch using polymer clay mixed with dry rose petals, something I've always wanted to try. And as I shaped each bead, I whispered a prayer rooted in love. Once hardened, I gently brushed them with gold foil, sealing in both the prayer and a touch of luminous softness. Simultaneously, this semester, I was writing a research paper on the Christian mystic Marguerite Porete. Her central theology was radical for its time, that the soul, when fully surrendered to God, becomes so united with divine love that it can no longer sin. In essence, she believed the path to holiness was not through striving or fear, but through complete and utter surrender. Her words were so bold and threatening to the church that she was eventually executed for them in the early 1300s. But I believe her spirit is very much alive and with me. I felt her presence as I crafted these beads. I felt her courage echoing through the quiet moments of creation. The strand includes exactly 33 beads. I chose this number with intention. 3 has always been my favorite number. It represents harmony, balance, and sacred geometry. To me, the Trinity is not only a cornerstone of Christian theology, but a sacred symbol that transcends religion altogether. In my work with others, I always sense a Trinity present, myself, the other person, and spirit. It is in this triadic space that healing, connection, and transformation unfold. 3 is the number of wholeness, the beginning, the middle, and the end, the past, the present, and the future, body, mind, and spirit, maiden, mother, and crone. And when tripled into 33, it feels like a divine amplification of sacred presence. This piece also includes the number 11, which I chose as a symbolic reminder of the sacred balance between masculine and feminine energies, not as fixed binaries, but as fluid spiritual principles that exist within all of us. Regardless of how one identifies in terms of gender, these energies are present and alive in every soul. The masculine and feminine are not opposites to be divided or ranked, but complementary forces that, when integrated, help us move toward wholeness. The number 11 to me reflects this duality and unity, 2 ones standing side by side, distinct yet equal. It speaks to partnership, alignment, and the beauty that emerges when we allow space for all expressions of being. In a time when gender identity is politicized, misunderstood, and in many cases weaponized, I wanted this piece to hold space for healing. It is a soft but steady affirmation that every person, man, woman, trans, non-binary, gender expansive, and beyond has a rightful place here. Each of us carries wisdom, each of us holds a piece of the sacred, and each of us is needed to restore the balance that this world so desperately craves. Rather than erasing or simplifying the complexity of gender, this piece honors it. It is a prayer for integration, for reverence, and for collective healing. It is a call to remember that the divine is not one or the other, but all, and that our unique identities, however they are named, claimed, or discovered, are holy reflections of that truth. Creating this piece felt like a co-creation between myself and spirit. It was meditative, mystical, and deeply personal. To complete it, I chose to hang the beads over the body of a snake that I had recently painted. Snakes, for me, symbolize transformation. They shed what no longer serves them again and again, and remind us that healing often means releasing, uncoiling, and starting anew. In many ways, this piece became a living altar to transformation, surrender, and grace. This theme of integration and transformation is embodied in the image of the snake, reminding us to release outdated identities or limitations so that something more authentic can emerge. They move low to the earth, yet are deeply connected to the spiritual realm. Their cyclical shedding mirrors the ongoing journey of alchemy, of reclaiming lost parts of ourselves and of honoring all that we are and all that we are still becoming. To place this prayer stand over the body of a snake I painted is no accident. It's a visual invocation of transformation through surrender. A layered message that healing happens not by choosing one side or another, but by embracing the sacred tension between them, by allowing the inner masculine and feminine to meet within us all, by honoring every part of the self and every person in our collective human family as inherently worthy, radiant, and whole. This piece with its 33 prayer beads and the quiet power of 11 is a portal, a prayer, a call back to balance in ourselves, in our communities, and in the way we relate to one another across differences. May it serve as a reminder that true beauty, like true divinity, never conforms, it includes. This piece, like Marguerite's teachings, is an offering, a whisper of surrender, a portal into grace, a portal to remind us to keep becoming. And so it is.
Thank you so much, Leah. Yes. Oh, okay. I don't know what happened. Our next speaker is Megan Maggie. You can stay. You don't have to wander away. Megan was born in rural Southwest Washington State. Megan joined the U.S. Navy straight out of high school. In 20 years of service, she wrote poetry to deal with the stress of 7 deployments, high stress working conditions, and all too common terrible leadership. In 2011, she found Emerald City MCC Seattle and began her social transition as a trans woman. In 2015, while working as a civil servant for the Navy, she transitioned. This change opened her creativity. In December of 2017, she self-published her first novel. She started her seminary career in fall term 2021, and her intent is to serve the MCC in pastoral leadership while she continues to write full-time. And I'll say, I so appreciate Megan's generosity of spirit is maybe the best phrase that comes to mind for me. With your classmates, that always ready with a really kind and encouraging word, the kind of generosity that really maybe can only come from someone who willingly writes full time for a job, who has been in the literal trenches of writing and other literary trenches. There you go. Exactly. So you know it means something when it's coming from Megan. So we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. So any person with deep-held spiritual beliefs has to be shocked and saddened by the epidemic of gun violence in the United States. And I should define my term gun violence. I'm not referring to just mass shootings. I'm not referring to school shootings only. I'm referring to all gun violence, including that's self-inflicted. And we're all too familiar with the steps that what happens after each one of these tragedies. First, the conservatives call for thoughts and prayers. Got to have our thoughts and prayers. And then at the same time, progressive politicians and others call for gun control laws. Got to take away them guns. And it's the focus on gun control while ignoring often the social and psychological factors that lead people to that kind of violence, that kind of horrible act. So these calls anger the gun people who are busy hoping and praying. And they mostly are hoping and praying that this time it isn't somebody from their side, that this time they can point at some factor about the person who committed the horrific act that adds up to a person that they're authorized to hate. And the news loves to cover it because, after all, crying people makes good television. And then after that, nothing happens. Nothing changes. We're back right where we started. So these people see the event, whoever those people are, on whatever side they find themselves, they see this event as somebody else's problem. I didn't do it. My people didn't do it. My family didn't do it. It's somebody else's problem. And so they believe, the people that own the guns believe they keep theirs secure and nothing could ever happen with them. And nobody in their family ever did anything. So it's not their problem. And the people with gun control know that just taking away the guns will solve the whole problem. Never mind that there has been violence committed against people with knives and swords and poison and bombs and all kinds of other ways. And all of that's horrific. The one common denominator being it's humans that are hurting humans. So this is where I find myself, where these people are at loggerheads and they will not move from their entrenched position because it's not their problem. It's not their thing to solve. Somebody else, the perpetrator, who's about half the time dead. You can blame their family maybe, but it's not my problem. And the thing is, that's where we end up again and again, back in our entrenched positions, and nothing changes. The progressive folks, which I count myself in that number, are praying for that Star Trek utopia where everybody's happy and all of them have got jobs and only the authorities have guns that can be set for stun and kill. So the thing is, my point behind this is that the killings are committed by people. No weapon, be it a butter knife or a firearm or whatever, leaps out and decides to kill somebody without anybody touching it. That's just not how this happens. But we focus on the guns. And there's reasons to focus on the guns. I'm not diminishing that, but it's not the only path to success. The problem is we're entrenched and we're at loggerheads and nobody wants to move. So this sculpture that I made, the cross is made from the expended brass of an AR-15. It's caliber 223.223, or in metric, it's a 5.56. The brass that you see lying around is a combination of 44 Magnum, 44 Special, 357 Magnum, and the long ones are from a 30-06. And all of it's expended. There's no powder but residue on there. But I thought by building it into a cross, most of the gun folks in the United States count themselves Christians. They count themselves as believers of Jesus, yet they got to have their guns and they got to not just do hopes and prayers. So I chose the cross because it was evocative of that community. And then you'll notice that there's a cup in the front, and the cup has got juice in it to substitute for blood. And you see, what I realized was Jesus talked about the talents. He had his servants that were given talents. And I forget, one had 5 and one had 3, and I think one had 1, but don't swear me to that. I don't remember for sure. But anyway, they were the ones that got multiple talents went out and made more of them. But the one that the servant that only had 1 just buried his and hid it. And to me, that speaks to where we're at. We're hiding behind our talent. We're hiding in our trench, and we're not solving the problem. I don't have all the answers. I don't complain. I don't proclaim to have all the answers. I have ideas, but the cross represents the fact that it's our problem. I can't hide behind it being somebody else's problem. It's ours. Every single person in America owns the problem of gun violence. So we need to get out of our trenches and actually find practical solutions that can at least move us towards less of that. So what I would like to ask each of you to do, if you're willing to, In the little bowl there, and I have some more juice to represent the blood that spilled on our streets and in our homes, is to come up with the spoon and dip a little of the blood off and put it on the cross, representing your acknowledgement that you share the responsibility for gun violence in our world. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. And we'll also, so folks are invited to come up and participate in the sculpture as they are,
Feel led.
or as they feel led. Yes, thank you, as they're willing to. And we'll also seamlessly segue into an intermission time. And we'll call it a Presbyterian 5 minutes, a United 7, which might be an Oz Freeman 10. I don't know. But we'll navigate it, and I'll call you back. So folks on Zoom can have a break, and we'll call you back in a little bit. Thanks, everybody. Welcome back. Great. Dr. Wheeler, take your time. It is. Thank you. That's nice. All right. Here we are, ready for round 2. And we're going to be kicking things off here with Walken Schweigert. Remember, we're keeping our questions for at the end, so we're almost to the end, so you should start cooking up your questions and comments. Walken is a queer transgender actor, musician, composer, and director. I could say that all again. Actor, musician, composer, director. Feels like there's actually more things that we could add to that list. But anyway, from St. Paul, Minnesota, a 2019 Jerome Foundation Fellow, he was mentored by the founder of the internationally renowned Double Edge Theater in Ashfield, Massachusetts. He is the founder and co-artistic director of Open Flame Theater, which produced his latest opera, The Garden, at the Southern Theater in Minneapolis. I saw that was awesome. Thanks in part to a J. Fund Award from the American Composers Forum. Walken is also an artist in residence and board and collective member at Philadelphia Community Farm in Osceola, Wisconsin, and a student here at United, studying paganism, theology in the arts, and spiritual direction. What can I say? I'm a fan of Walken's work and of Walken specifically. So I'll keep my mouth shut and not go on too long, but it's probably no surprise to anyone that I'm especially excited by the constructive kind of recovery work that Walken does in engaging Christian history and Catholic history in particular, and theology to create really life-giving and I would say like life-saving work. So it's just such an honor to be able to brag about you as a theology and arts student at United. So, Walken.
Thank you, Dr. Oz Freeman. Okay. I'm here today to share about the script for my newest opera called The Wilderness. This is part 3 of my rewilding triptych by my company, Open Flame Theater. The script is the result of over 13 years of research into the interlocking systemic oppressions that create the violence under which our society is organized. Parts 1 and 2 of the rewilding triptych ask, where did this violence come from? And what does it mean to want something different? The Wilderness asks, what are the seeds of a liberated future and how do we move towards it? What does it mean to rewild? I have asked myself this over and over and over again. And how is rewilding generative praxis in the struggle for liberation? In the past few years, my research for this performance has been shaped by the work of Adrienne Marie Brown, Sylvia Federici, Amitav Ghosh, Neil Price, Andreas Weber, Tyson Yunkaporta, Starhawk, Poke Lanoy, Bruce Rogers Vaughn, Fioga de Parma, Mary Jane Rubenstein, thanks Dr. Wheeler, Karen Barad, and many, many others. Each one of them has taught me something valuable. From Andreas Weber, I learned that we are all always in intimate metabolic relationships with the world around us, such that it is impossible to say where we end and where the air we breathe begins. From Starhawk, I learned that when you don't have an embodied awareness of your own power within, it is immensely difficult to find power with others, and it opens you up to exploitation from those who want to have power over you. From Polk, Illinois, I learned about the 5 steps of the decolonizing process. 1, rediscovery and recovery. 2, mourning. 3, dreaming. 4, commitment. 5, action. Understood one way, rewilding is simply the work of decolonization. From Neil Price, I learned some of what it was that my Scandinavian ancestors had lost, what they had to mourn, and began to explore what they gave up in order to become white. From Sylvia Federici, I learned about the larger historical and economic context that shaped the formation of whiteness and capitalism, and how this system of racial capitalism is rooted in misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, and ableism. From Bruce Rogers Vaughan, I learned the spiritual damage of loneliness and isolation, and how that is culturally engineered by a neoliberal capitalism. From Amitav Ghosh, thanks Dad, I learned that humans are not the only beings capable of making meaning, and that this is a vital cultural shift necessary to free us from the psychological shackles of capitalism. From Fioga de Parma, I learned to claim myself as a witch. I learned to trust my own intuition, my own imagination, as well as tools and techniques for how to relate to the other beings around me outside of the relationship of extraction that I had been taught by capitalism. From Tyson Yunkaporta, I learned various principles of how to relate to storytelling, knowledge, and perception that bring me closer to authentic relationship with other human and non-human life. I have often described this performance, that being The Wilderness, as a mix between Frog and Toad by Arnold Lebel and Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett. Both of these are present in the work as well. At the heart of this opera are 2 clowns who love each other very much, and yet find themselves in what we would call an absurd and tragic situation. The true absurdity of it is not revealed until we near the end of the play, so I will not reveal it here. What I will say is that grief has haunted this triptych since the beginning. The Wastelands Part 1, which is Part 1 of the triptych, I often describe as a eulogy for capitalism. It is structured around the 7 stages of grief: shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and decathexis, which is emotional disinvestment. Part 2, The Garden, features a funeral very prominently in which a trans character is forced to eulogize himself in a ritual modeled on a real manipulative and abusive tactic used in actual conversion therapy clinics. The grief in The Wilderness is as much collective as it is personal. In researching this performance, I found that as a white-bodied person, I did not truly know or understand my own history. You may recall that the first step of decolonization is rediscovery and recovery. It has taken a long time for me to speak publicly about these things because I have never wanted it to seem like I was trying to avoid the privilege that my light-colored skin has given me in this society. And it was world-shattering to learn that there was resistance to the modern-day capitalist system in Europe from the very beginning. I was doing ancestry research, trying to understand my own heritage as I was reading Federici's Caliban and the Witch for the first time, from which this quote is a quote from. I don't really believe in luck, but as luck would have it, the very day that I discovered that one line of my family came from Tyrol, Austria, I found myself reading about Tyrol, Austria in the book. I read about the system of self-organization, one could call it anarchist, that they had established, and how that system was destroyed in brutal and violent repression as part of the peasant rebellions and subsequent witch hunts in Western Europe. I read about the people who were burned and tortured. That day, I also learned that it was only about 20 years later that my ancestors from Tyrol immigrated to the United States. I know very little about those ancestors of mine. But I know the pain that was passed down, the trauma, and it began to occur to me how utterly impossible it is that I am the only queer or trans person that I know of that I am related to by blood on either side of my family tree. How could that be? I do not believe it is possible to truly historically reconstruct pre-Christian pagan traditions. Too much knowledge has been lost, and anyway, we don't live in that world anymore. I do believe in the powers of the imagination. I believe we live in an interconnected world where meaning is present in every interaction, every relationship, human and non-human alike. I believe that if we truly want to live in a different world, we can bring it into being. I believe that this will mean utterly rethinking what we understand as real and reality in our current culture of capitalism. At one point, I felt this opera was doomed because it seemed to be pointing itself towards the presentation of a utopian vision of what a liberated society could look like. I am deeply averse to such utopias because A, they too often present a vision of the world as static and unchanging, AKA perfect. And B, since I was 14, I have believed that there is not one answer for how to reach liberation because liberation does not look the same to everyone, nor should it. All we need is an end to the hegemony. All we need is the opportunity to live outside of capitalism if we choose to. We need 100,000 utopias, not one. But we live in the world of hegemony. Now more than ever, these are the times that we are in. What does it mean to champion diversity and pluralism in these times? It means being accused of unspecificity and weakness. But we are not weak. We are just forgetful. We need to remember who we are, and what can't be remembered, we need to summon our generative impulses to create. I hope this opera will be a step in catalyzing that impulse. And I believe that part of that step is we need to understand, feel, believe, and know that we are powerful. We are meant to be creative beings. That is part of the gift of being alive and incarnate. And there is so much more majesty, beauty, and connection out there for us than this society will ever let us know is possible. Those who know me well know I'm not big on reformation. I claim the titles of anarchist and revolutionary unironically. I believe in collective power. I believe in the power of love. I believe in dreams and the imagination, and I believe that none of us are ever truly alone. This opera is an invitation into this new and very old perspective. I hope someday you are all able to see it performed and are able to tell me if you felt invited in. I want to close by evoking and expressing gratitude always to my mentors, Stacy Klein and Carlos Uriona of Double Edge Theater, to my close collaborators on this work, Katie Burgess, Kate Toby, and Isabel Nelson, to Dr. Jennifer Oz Freeman and my classmates who gave me such incredible feedback this term. Thank you. To my loving parents who planted in me the seed of the voracious hunger for justice and the love of things that grow. And to my beloved fiance who has and continues to hold me through this culminating journey of completion of my first cycle of theatrical works. And to all of you for bearing witness to me and my colleagues as we share our works here today. Thank you. Thank you. And now I would like to invite Megan and Emily and Kate up here. We are going to read a very short, I promise, a very short scene from the opera. It's hard to know how to introduce exactly what is happening in this scene. I feel like that would be a whole other 5 minutes of talking, and I know that we're tight on time. So we're just gonna read it for you as it's written on the page and leave it sort of mysterious and hope that you will all get to see it staged and then you'll have context for what you're about to hear. We're gonna use these microphones and stand. Was that kind of the limit? Sorry about your feet. Huh?
Oh,
Oh, yeah. Are you still in the? Oh, we can't see Megan.
all right, let me.
We could have, maybe two of us could share the microphone and stand here, and then two of us could stand.
Yeah, that works.
Okay. I'm gonna put this back.
See, I don't know if this is the longer of the.
Just choose one and then you can have this.
Oh.
Oh,
okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's totally.
Hello, 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 hello. Flash.
Just have them. All right, sorry, just a little, yeah. I want to also say that this is Kate Toby, who has been one of the creators of the opera and will also be playing, oh yes. And will be playing the role of Cassius. And I will say Megan is playing the role of Violet, and me and Emily are playing the roles of the Compasskin. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. Okay. Everyone alive has their own way into the dance, Violet.
Some who have not forgotten are guided through their people.
They know the world is not dead, inert, objective.
Our world contains many worlds, and they are all vital, all brimming with meaning and their own creative forces.
It is not uncommon, actually, for people like you to sense this. Across time and space and culture, queer folk have often found themselves with one foot in the spirit worlds.
The great mysteries of life, of blood and twig and bone, can never be disenchanted.
If we think the magic is gone, it is because we are choosing not to see it.
For there never was any such thing as the wilderness, Violet.
To some, to be in the wilderness was to be lonely when surrounded by the beautiful and brutal splendor of the world.
But some have always known what the colonizer calls the wilderness is not something without, but something within.
An energy, a consciousness that is forever inside us and inside all beings.
It is our connection to source, to life itself. To be alive is to be wild, to be of the wilderness.
And so we have always been wild, which means we are never alone.
What did you say?
You have always been wild.
So you will never be alone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. Our penultimate speaker is Tyrone Fowlkes, who is an artist, spiritual director, and an Episcopal priest. He's pursuing a DMin in theology and the arts at United. His current doctoral research focuses on the intersections of spirituality, justice, and the arts, and how creative dialogue and social construction are cultivated through collaborations of community organizations, philanthropists, and local artists. Heck yeah. He deeply believes in the power of arts and culture to cultivate true community and inspire real change. Tyrone also holds a Master's of Arts Management degree from Columbia College, a Master's of Divinity from Christian Theological Seminary, and a Bachelor of Fine Arts from the Heron School of Art in Indianapolis. And I'll say it's just a privilege to have collaborated with Tyrone just earlier this year on the wonderful Meditations on Failure exhibit. Just feel so seen in something like that. And so I look forward to all of our future collaborations as well. It's always a joy to work with you. Tyrone.
Thanks, Professor. Shapes and Patterns, 5 Works on Church and Black Gay Personhood is a series of collage and mixed media works reflecting some of my own journey as a Black gay priest in the Episcopal Church. While many identify the church and parish life and congregational life as places for theological and spiritual formation, empowerment, and self-understanding, congregations can also be places of mistrust and great pain. And like most priests, as well as those who sit in our pews, I've encountered both. I'm really thinking about the work that I'm going to share with you as kind of a series of sketches. They are the start of a future and much deeper exploration of gathering and ritual motifs common in congregational life. and witness through the lens of race and queer sexuality. My concerns include the role and reliance on structures and issues of authority, as well as dependence on programs as indicative of a thriving church, both of which may hinder free and honest expression and the movement of the Spirit. For those of us of a certain generation, you may remember the British pop band in the 90s known as Swing Out Sister. Their biggest hit still remains Breakout, Don't Stop to Ask. Now you finally make a break at last. You've got to find your way, say what you want to say, you break out, right? The gay community resident with this song is kind of fashion designer. For those of you who remember the video, this kind of fashion designer kind of theme, this design house in this kind of hip urban area. We kind of ate that stuff up. When the closet no longer serves you and you dare to find your way into what can sometimes be a cruel and hostile world, you're kind of in this mode of breaking out. Swing Out Sister had another hit called Somewhere in the World, from where I draw on the theme of shapes and patterns. Maybe we've made mistakes. Maybe we're not the only ones. Maybe it's not too late to start all over. All the shapes and patterns you'll see in your mind, somewhere in the world, someone's thinking of you. And so in thinking about this body of work, I'm making notes of the idea of shapes and patterns in church life. Thinking about those things which routinely emerge as a priest in the church, such as the idea around community and how we create community and for whom we create community. Who do we allow into that community and who do we keep out? Concerns about ritual, and for some traditions, almost a preoccupation with ritual and the meaning of certain practices. There are issues of power, and for some people, power is their number one pursuit, more so than money or wealth or influence or even great sex. Some people really want power more than anything else. And it's interesting that when we talk about issues of diversity in the Episcopal Church and striving to be an inclusive and welcoming church, as we often do, we still exercise these rather strange and really odd power differentials. So the question that this raises for me as a Black queer priest and someone who grew up in a poor urban setting and everything that comes with that, as someone who kind of made it out, as it were, I'm thinking about kind of what do I owe? What should my concerns be within all of that? And what should I speak to and who should I speak for? Who am I in Christian community? This Episcopal Church, which is largely a white denomination, a largely aging denomination, and a church in deep, steep decline. And ultimately, as we say in the Episcopal Church, how can I be a good Episcopalian? Often showing up in ways that implies that you don't really have to get your hands dirty in the Episcopal Church. You just have to make people think that you are. So I've been thinking about all this in creating this body. Not all of what I've been thinking about is representative in what I'm showing you today. So in that regard, I'm kind of sorry to disappoint, but these are just really kind of sketches. First pass was the start of something, hopefully, that I can plant deeper. So in the first slide, bath. This piece comes out of the routine of daily cleansing and how it's filtered through an idea of gaze of the Black body and finds a home in ideas around baptism. Bath is the first in this series, as baptism is first how we enter into the Christian community. Here I've made use of Gordon Lathrop's idea of how baptism is in and of itself a kind of a bath, as it were, and not just a washing away of grit and grime, but a kind of re-energizing that takes place, where we are enticed to step into the pool and discover this for ourselves, or sometimes we are enticed to step into the pool with someone, like the object of our desire and affection. So I'm thinking about desire and affection and sexual energy in this piece. So the rite of baptism quite naturally conjures this image of bathing in the baptismal font, because that's what's really kind of happening when we're baptized. You are being cleansed, you are bathing, you are made new. And then there's this element of gaze, of watching and feeling watched as if under a type of surveillance. I suspect that most gay men can recall their pubescent high school years when the gym class and the thought of having to shower together afterward was both titillating and terrifying at the same time. And yet being in this kind of sexually charged space really teases out this deep sense of vulnerability, and swirling around are things like longing and desire and confusion and taboo. For many, it's the first time of seeing your peers naked and seeing many people naked at one time in one space, and not knowing really how you should feel about that. And yet all these things show up in the baptism, in our baptism as well, if it's done right, that is. People are usually standing around witnessing this occasion, while the baptizend is given a new call and a new life to live. Some part of you is being invited into a new experience, and the life that you thought you were living is now being asked to make room for someone else who has to come and occupy the stage with you. And so baptism is often confusing, right? For that very reason. In the second image, altar is the second piece of the series. Here a man nearly smothers his own son as a means to convey his sheer love for him, as well as the desire to keep him safe and protected. Most parents know this feeling well. I'm simply reflecting on my own life as a priest and the hundreds of times I've stood at the altar to make sacrifices, to make the sacrifice, as it were, in the Eucharist, and to compel others to think about the sacrifices they have to make in their own lives. I love those passages in the Gospels that talk about the Father's love for his Son, sometimes even referring to him as the beloved. I want to hold the reality of a father's love for his son and the idea of Jesus's sharing of his own body and blood. And yet I know that the emotional bond that exists between the Father and the Son, as encountered in the Gospels, is not so immediate in male relationships or in Black male relationships. And I think it's a problem for men, especially when we think about our ability to be emotionally intimate with our children. And when we think that our ability to be emotionally intimate with our children has nothing to do with our desire that they be kept safe from all harm. So similar to my peer Megan in this piece, I'm also thinking about the realities of gun violence that greatly affects every young person, either because it's the streets on where they live or in the schools where they go, or part of their gaming, as it were, and how so many young people across all American cities really have to contend with violent and loss and trauma, and what that does to them over time. And so in a place like Chicago, where there's a lot of Black on Black violence, often involving guns, the outrage, oddly, doesn't come so much from Black men as it does Black women. In the next slide, this is assembly, the gathering of the faithful, as it were, or as some people in our church like to say, the usual suspects. I said earlier that there's a great deal of diversity in the Episcopal Church, but that there are also these kind of weird power imbalances. And I don't mean just the orders of ministry, because it's often the case that bishops don't have a lot of power, but that lay people have tremendous amounts of power that's often unacknowledged and overlooked. And if that power is unchecked, then they can do a lot of damage to a congregation. But I also want to think about the influence that exists among, in our church, the Episcopal Church, the influence that exists among white gay men, as well as the very overt racism that is present through them. The historic racism within the Episcopal Church, and how many in our denomination, like most denominations, can't quite acknowledge and grapple with how racism shows up in the structure of the church, as well as in their own personal decision-making. It can sometimes make for a very horrifying drama. And so here we are, kind of all mixed together. In the next image, selfie. Selfie is obviously a self-portrait. It stems from an earlier portrait. This, I think, image started from a photo that was taken about 20 years ago. And when I was doing some sketches for this piece way back several weeks ago, I kind of imagined me in my clergy collar at 55. But as you can see, I haven't changed very much, right? The nexus for me, the kind of nexus experience, the nexus reality for me is, I think my desire always to kind of go back, even though this photo was taken 20 years ago, I'm always kind of wanting to go back to my earlier self and be in constant conversation with Tyrone then. And in the last piece of the series, city. When I was young, but old enough to ride the bus on my own, I often went into downtown. I, was just fascinated with people who scurried about, with people who, made important decisions. I was fascinated with how they dressed and, how they walked and what they carried in their hands. And cities are incubators for all sorts of things, but I was just kind of blown away by all this. I was blown away by the reality of how you could find a job in the city, how you could find culture, how you could make trades and, barter and engage in, under the table deals and backroom deals, right? And in my own coming out, I found that, as a gay man, and if you're a gay man in rural populations, you have to kind of find your way to the city if you're going to feel safe, if you're going to have a life. And so, and by the way, the cities, the downtown areas are where all the kind of dance clubs are at, right? And where the bars are at. So, and yet in cities, you also kind of find challenges to this. You discover what parts of the city are really worthy of investment by those that hold power. You discover higher living costs, of course. In the inner cities, the reality of drugs and gangs and hazards of all sorts, right? It is interesting to me as a Christian that according to the Christian text, right, humanity's role in creation begins in a garden, but it's fulfilled in a city, right? And it takes a lot to get there, but at the end of the day, the city is just there. It's just there. And that's really the point of this last piece. The city is just there. It's calm. It's quiet. Everyone is being who they're called to be. Everyone has enough. So with that, thank you.
Wow.
Thank you, everyone. And thanks, Tyrone. We're going to turn now to our last speaker, Amy Zucker Morgenstern. And then we will have still some time for conversation and Q&A at the end. So Amy is a Demon student in theology and the arts and has made visual art for most of her life, having worked as a Unitarian Universalist minister since her ordination in 2000, mostly at the congregation in Palo Alto, California, with whom she has served for 22 years. She came to United to charge her ministry with more social transformation and art. And I think we can say came to the right place. Amy hopes to do more of both after June, when she will leave full-time parish ministry, but continue engaging in full-time ministry with the world. She lives in San Francisco with her wife and teenage daughter. And as you'll see here, you'll even on the screen already have a sense of what I've really enjoyed about Amy's work this term is a really playful and beautiful, visually speaking, engagement with the relationship between image and word. And I have observed Amy to be somebody who really undertakes art making as a way to learn, has learned something about what she thinks and about scripture and reading and so on through the process of creating this body of work. So Amy, turn it to you.
Thank you. Wow, it's hard to go last after all these amazing, amazing pieces, and especially after Tyrone's absolutely gorgeous collage. But at its best, looking at other people's art inspires me to go do more. So I'm itching to go do some art today. These 4 pieces are all explorations of the Tower of Babel, which is also the topic of my dissertation, if I ever do it. They're mostly collage, some drawing, and
altered pages, which is a form of collage as well. The words in red ink here are the same sentence in many languages. Can you understand me? According to the God of the story in Genesis 11, people could only accomplish the building of the tower and all that it represented because they spoke one language, only one language, one purpose. So I'm taken with the idea that just as the tower was made of bricks and tar and labor and time, it was also in a very real sense made of language, made of communication. In my pieces, I started representing that idea by using words and letters to make up the towers that I drew. And it occurred to me that we also use towers for communication. Humans have done that for a very long time. For example, sending signals along the Great Wall of China from one of its beacon towers to the next. And in our time, a vivid and a ubiquitous example is cell phone towers. So the dishes of the cell phone tower here are put together of rubber stamp letters. We use these towers to send language, and also it took language to create them, communication. But if the author of Genesis 11 was suggesting that we need complete unity of language in order to accomplish such things, I could not disagree more. The fact is that we never do and never did have a single language. Even among us right now, speaking and understanding English together, there are gaps in understanding. The sentence I just uttered has a slightly different significance to each person here, and perhaps in some cases, a radically different significance. And so in a way, we're fated to dwell, each of us, inside our own minds, speaking our own unique, private, and uncommunicable language. That makes being human sound isolated and lonely. And yet we do manage to build, invent, collaborate, establish friendships, fall in love, learn, teach. In short, we create a life together despite these gaps. If the author of the Tower of Babel story meant to bemoan our fragmentation, it's also true that humanity's speaking thousands of different languages, as we do, is a beautiful and fascinating fact of our existence. While this multiplicity, and I'm speaking here just of different languages, English, French, Swahili, not even the private languages, this multiplicity is also a metaphor for both the gaps that we experience in understanding even our closest kin and our closest friends, and the ways we bridge those gaps. So in this piece, I'm imagining the same short message bouncing off the cell phone tower, person to person all over the world. Can you understand me? And we say it in all our different languages. Whether these different languages are a gift, despite the apparent intent of the God in the story, is a key question, just as the answer to the question, can you understand me, is up for each one of us to decide. Next. The other three pieces all involve altered pages, which are a form of visual art and found poetry in which the artist blocks out some words on a page and allows others to emerge. Sometimes it's called blackout poetry, if you want to look up other examples. The artist Tom Phillips, who created a masterpiece of this art form, calls his piece a treated novel. In this piece, I'm exploring some of the implications of the Babel story as an origin story of the Babylonian Empire. It seems indisputable that the author of the story was speaking of that empire in some way, because the word Babel, Babylon, Babylonia those are all used interchangeably for the most part in the Hebrew Bible. But then if this is a story of the beginning of Babel, is it a tale of the beginning of this greatness of this empire? Is it foretelling its collapse? There's a delicious ambiguity there. Engaging with stories of empires past, I'm hoping, may help us see our own empire for what it is, and why and how we can dismantle it and move beyond it. So two of the best known portrayals of the Tower of Babel in Western art are a pair of paintings made a few years apart by the 16th century Dutch and Flemish painter Peter Bruegel the Elder. So I drew part of his 1563 version onto this page from The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. It's actually an abridged version of The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Make of that what you will. And also I drew the piece of the tower upside down, because again, that just seemed right in these times. Perhaps subversive, literally inversive of the building of empires. Something I find particularly intriguing about Bruegel's tower is that it shows the tower in many stages of building and perhaps of collapse. And we can see just that painting on the next slide. It's hard to make out because some places it looks like, oh, is it crawling apart? It actually is like it's being built out of the living rock, which is a very interesting portrayal here on the coast where there are no piles of rock. Anyway, it's beautiful. And the more I look up close at this painting, the more I discover. But if you look at certain sections, well, I can't point them out, but down near the lower left, just a little to the upper right of the gathering of people there's two arches of gray stone. And if you look closely at those, which I realize is hard for us to do in this situation, they look like they're crumbling, like the stone is actually crumbling and being repaired by the workers there rather than being built from scratch. So there's all sorts of interesting stuff going on there. And then there's all these different layers that you see as you move inward and upward. Are those newer? Are they inner? Are they being discovered by the builders? I find all those layers really interesting because empire is one of those things that's, I would say, better eroded than built. As the building of an empire is not something to rejoice in, whereas its collapse can be quite an occasion for rejoicing. So destruction is creation, creation is destruction, at least for the subject peoples of the empire. And something that really compels me about this medium of altered pages is that it also plays with destruction. One creates the poetry by blacking out much of what is already there. The United States operates, if you can go to the next slide. Thanks. The US operates partly as an empire and always has, both towards its people internally and towards the rest of the world. And it's done so in ways that tend to be stealthy and unacknowledged because we like to think of ourselves as spreading democracy and being a democracy. The current administration, of course, has openly imperialist plans, and that's very much on my mind, was very much on my mind when I paired my thinking about today's events with a text about the fallen empire of Rome and an image of the fallen empire of Babylon. So the text that I pulled out can be read in a few different ways. So I'll let you read it in the order you prefer. Give you a moment to just do that. Any resemblance to actual persons living or dead is completely intentional. Slide, please. Here's something about the, oh, I think I took this in the wrong direction. I didn't ever change the order. Can you go on two more and then we'll come back to this one? Thank you. Here's an interesting thing about the accidents of this medium. The appearance of the phrase, and you'll be able to see it more clearly in the next slide, but let's just hold it here for a moment. Down near the bottom, it says a Palestinian valley. That was one of the accidents of this medium. I just noticed it as I read and reread and pored over the words that suggested themselves in this page, which is a page from the Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible, something like that. Page about Babylon. I didn't set out to make this piece particularly political, much less about Israel and Palestine, but there it was. And so I decided to set it apart a bit via color and to let it echo with this interesting fact. Of course, the Palestinian Valley is mentioned in this very straightforward piece of writing about Babylon because the Palestinian Valley was colonized by the empire of the people who built the tower, exiling the Jews. And that it is being colonized again in modern times, often in the name of Judaism, is an irony that I find tormenting and also demands my conscientious response, not only as a human being, but as somebody who is Jewish of origin. The doorway and stairway collaged in here are from a ruin of a former civilization. When we explore ruins, I find it's so hard to remember that they were a living city not long ago, that were walking, where people walked and shopped and peed and bled and talked and did all the things that people do. Even when all the placards tell us what the place was like, and there might be drawings of what things must have looked like when people lived there, it's just hard not to see them just as ruins. And I wanted to bring the freshly built tower, kind of on the left, that I made myself, and the ruin on the right into close contact here, like to imagine that we could walk through this doorway and up the stairs of the ruins and enter the time millennia ago when the Tower of Babel was a living place. Really not so long ago in the scheme of things, nor is it perhaps so long into the future that the places we're walking now will be ruins, and our lives will become very hard to detect by future people. Next slide. The phrase, where'd it go? That's very interesting. Well, shoot. What I tried to do, maybe I changed the color of the font or something. I shouldn't do this kind of work late at night. In any case, what I was doing was pulling out the language that's here, so I can read it for you. Captivity, empire, from slavery to resistance to. If mankind is to be free of the one mind which gives power and authority to false gods, a Palestinian valley. The phrase "the one mind" really grabbed my attention here. The one mind which gives power and authority to false gods. And the thought of how can we be free by that? I thought again of that issue of many languages. The multiplicity of languages, the multiplicity of ways of thinking is a guard against false gods. It's hard to worship ourselves, our empire, say, the gods that reflect us alone and that we imagine bless our empire and ourselves, if we're constantly reminded that there are so many other ways of being. If we are to be free of the one mind, what might we do? Well, resist, go from slavery to resistance. And I also find the threat of ruin humbling. The evidence that other peoples have considered themselves the center and peak of humanity and their empires crumbled. Thinking of Shelley's Ozymandias here, you see the evidence of past cultures and realize everything is more fleeting than it likes to think. Okay, if we can go back 3 slides, to the last piece. There we go. This piece also makes use of images of places that are now ruined, several of them put together. They were once busy cities and homes, and in this case, the underlying text is a page from a physics textbook, the section at the end of the chapter that poses questions for the student to answer. As with the previous piece, I was thinking about how we might trap ourselves by thinking in terms of one center, one way, one God made in our image, one project like the tower, like the people who built the tower who thought this will put us on the map. It's not such a bad ambition to say we want to build something and we want to be recognized from a distance, but thinking in terms of a center can be a trap. And conversely, we might free ourselves as the builders of the tower were freed despite themselves. They were scattered when they began to speak many languages. We could take many paths instead of the one tower that goes in only one direction. The whole project of the tower and what happened to it leads to a lot of questions, which of course I'm wrestling with and enjoying wrestling with in these pieces and in the pieces that will form my dissertation. And the text helped articulate them because it was just full of questions. So next page. I'll give you a minute again to read the poems that emerge. So maybe the people in Genesis 11 had a perfect plan, a tower whose walls would transmit meaning, one meaning, a simple unified meaning. And maybe we have a similar plan individually or as a culture, as an empire. But I like this question. Suppose we dispense with a center, especially since our plans for unity always seem to be coercive. They silence difference in order to impose an artificial unity. So maybe that's why maybe that's why the God in the story caused the tower to collapse and left it in ruins. But I also note that what remains is beautiful in its own right. And that's what I was trying to portray here. Maybe even more beautiful than the completed tower could ever be. The people, each speaking their own new tongues, don't only scatter, they stay in conversation. And sometimes these conversations are conflicts, and sometimes they're even wars, and they're incredibly destructive, brutally destructive, but sometimes they're incredibly fruitful, and usually both of those things at the same time. I love the way that these ruins look when they come into dialogue with each other. All the many attempts by human beings to build something that will last forever fail. But together, even in ruins, they build up to something new. I don't have any answers about what that might look like, but I'm hopeful. I love the questions. I find hope in them, and that's where I'll end today so we have some time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And maybe we can join one more round of applause for all of our speakers. And we're pretty close to time, but perhaps if our students could come forward, we could field like a really well-conceived, comprehensive question that addresses all of the works together.
Yeah.
Dr. Murad.
That's good.
Hello, everyone. With graduation, commencement taking place tomorrow, my question to you is, what about these projects was a result of your education here? I mean, I sound like I'm from like the alumni office, but no, but really, like, what actually? Yes, yes, no, really, like thinking back to prior to you coming into United. Prior to you taking the course with Dr. Oz Freeman, thinking of where you could have been at this point with this project and where it is right now, what's the result of you being here?
Speak in the microphone. If you're gonna respond.
Oh, do you want me to go first?
Sure.
I'm here. Okay. By the way the classes worked was just like what you just saw. We collaborated with the professor kind of guiding us, but a lot of it was just a collaboration with all of us where we all learned. United has taught me how to ask questions I didn't know how to ask. United has taught me that the purpose of asking the question isn't always to find the answer, but in just asking, there is power. In just recognizing you don't have the answer, but the answer might be there. And in collaboration as a community, some of those answers might be found. So that's my answer.
Yeah, I'll say I came to United to write and create The Wilderness because I was like, where could I possibly go where I could research praxis for revolution and liberation and how those relate to the pre-Christian pagan traditions of my European ancestors and mysticism. I was like, I know these things are all related. I was like, where could I possibly go? And luckily I was friends with Isabel Nelson and she was like, you should go to United. Yeah, it's like, there's the answer to that question I feel like is huge, but I will say that, I wasn't ever sure that I would ever finish The Wilderness because I wasn't sure that I would be able to be clear enough about my own perspective to have something to say. And I think in in gratitude to some of the thinkers that I mentioned earlier and the professors in this room. I have. So thank you.
Maybe the folks on Zoom also want to chime in. I'll just say briefly that I was like, Wheeler can attest that I was very skeptical of theology when I first came. I didn't know what it was. And I was like, what's this white man's, discipline? Like, I'm an artist. What am I doing here? But I am such a people person. And it feels like, as somebody who's raised humanist in an agnostic kind of world, the like discipline of theology makes me feel like I'm in a part of a tradition and like really get to grapple deeply with ideas that are so basic and foundational to my life as a human being. So yeah, I'd say like my art is really informed by all that rigor. So yeah, thanks to the faculty and the classmates. Yeah.
So my my
You
video
heard
blew
it.
up. Can you hear me?
Who else? You want to?
Is my audio working?
Go, Amy.
Oh, good. Yeah, my camera lasted just long enough. Okay. So yeah, thanks for that great question. And I my thinking about empire in relation to this story at all came straight out of Lori Leiterbright's course on intersectional feminism last summer, which she's offering again this summer. Plug. It was just awesome, and I just had not put that together with this story, even though the story had fascinated me for a long time. And then I looked at it again and I said, oh my God, it's a story about empire. And so that's had a huge effect. And being in an academic atmosphere that takes art seriously, where we can do art as our exploration, as our way of learning and our way of presenting and thinking things through together, is just amazing. Those two things have been very separate in my life, the academic and the art. Even, and I say that as somebody who was an undergraduate art major. It was just treated differently. And I just love being in this place for that reason.
I'll just say that at 55, I'm starting to use phrases like, 20 and 25 years ago, right? And I have to catch myself, but really 25 years ago, I did my MDiv, and considered myself an artist then. And so one of the things I think about really after being ordained, many years of professional ministry, a life as a designer, a life as a social service worker, is the importance of intersectionality, of integration as well, and bringing everything together. And, my life here at United has allowed me to kind of do that in a way that helps keep the lens of theology clear, and how I practice theology, and yet looking at how I can practice theology through my art, right? Through my kind of history as well as an artist, and in my life as a human supportive services worker. And so, I think in many ways, I think it's about that for me. So, it feels like we're up here like at a press conference or something like that, about to, Exactly. Tierany, if you would like to kind of offer something, there you go.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that I had come to United too was because of the integration of art and theology, and how art can serve as a way of knowing yourself and knowing God and being in your community. And growing up in a really conservative Christian community, I feel as if being around the professors and the material and the people at United has really expanded how I think about making artwork and how it can be a tool and how it can also be a source of knowledge. And so being in this class and being able to make, like relics of moments and of like experiences that happen and intertwine those with my knowledge and understanding of God has been really formidable and wonderful for me.
United gave me permission to be weird. And on that note, I think a good, because I want to respect our time. We have a very busy afternoon still with the president's reception and the baccalaureate service and so on. And there are plenty of, well, maybe I shouldn't say plenty because I haven't seen the table. There are refreshments still, I believe. So for folks who are in person, if you have further questions or comments that you want to share with the artist, please hang out for a little bit and do that. And for folks online, you could still solicit, you could email your questions and comments as well. Thanks, everyone, and congratulations to this wonderful class. Yeah. Came together. Those works are just, beautiful. It's nice to see them up on the big screen. Like, I don't know.
They kind of moved from my earlier sketches a little bit. Just kind of start working with this piece of paper and so there you go.
Yeah, well, I hope that you can, those things kind of settle, or you can routine whatever that you can save some space for continuing the.
Yeah, I do what I can here. For a certain smile.
So, yes.
I was thinking, I've got to simplify my yeah, this is just not getting us. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we're having a hard time.
Yeah, I mean, here you are, 55, you gotta.
To do so.
You're not 25 anymore, not even 35.
So yeah,
That's good, yeah.
this is great. And I'm really sorry I can't stay for the. When I thought about this months ago, I thought, okay, I was gonna be here.
Right.
It's very nice. So it was, and so anyway, the job.
Yeah.
Shit at everything.
Yeah.
Like,
It's a huge, huge change. Yeah, in the middle of the turn. Like, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, look at her going to
story.
One of the things that practice like and it lets us, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's what it's recognized. They do I don't know. One of these is story. The names every Wednesday, back the day, like, I don't know how that really, the implication would say that. Like, faculty are, they've done some like, yeah. Anyway.
Well, at work, I'm interested in this house. So really got it. The organization is.
Yeah.
But we got started out of it. which will basically infiltrate you. Basically, we just have everybody. So this is the AA guys. You add to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So kind of rooted, now we're gonna have some multi-complex agency, but.
This, was to save the batteries. For how to do this. I once upon a time knew how to do it. There we go.